guest today has $800 million in assets under management. And he does that with about 42,000 storage units across the country and other means. But ask him what keeps him up at night, and I'll bet it's not the real estate, it's the people. Scott Lewis is the co founder of Spartan Investment Group and a leader who knows that you can't just invest your way to success without the right team. Scott, welcome to How I Turned the Corner.
Thank you, Kendra. Appreciate being here.
So, when we were chatting before this started, we talked a little bit about the fact that your industry is not really an industry that is necessarily known as maybe stepping up and taking care of its people first. And yet you have taken that approach. And it's led to a lot of success. I would love to hear like the origin story of you and why did you make this a focus at the beginning?
Yeah, it's interesting kind of I wouldn't describe myself as an entrepreneur. I mean, obviously by definition I am, right? But I didn't have popsicle stands or do any of that stuff when I was younger. My partner Ryan did. He sold Cutco knives, blah blah blah. But I never really saw myself being the CEO of a company or a business owner or anything. One of the main reasons I did this is kind of people related. I tell a story of a company that I worked for early in my career. And there was a team member there that just really good team member, and the job was this combination of very scientific technical skills with a personality to interact with the customer. So it's a pretty difficult kind of combo to find. And the company was very traditional, like 8 to 5. And man, like this guy just could not get to work at 8 o'clock. Like I don't know what it was about 8 o'clock, but he'd be there at 8:05, 8:15, whatever. And they gave him so much grief. And it didn't matter. It didn't matter what time he showed up, right? It didn't matter if he was there at 9 or 7. It was irrelevant to the actual execution of the business. And I always thought, what are you doing? Like you have somebody here that's dedicated to the company, that's a very rare skill to find, who works hard, and you're giving him grief because he was 5 minutes late. I get it. I'm a military guy, so standards and being on time, like I 100% understand that. And he wasn't adhering to the standards. But why is the standard there? And that was kind of like one of the main reasons why I decided to go out on my own is there was just so much stupid stuff. Like I was working for the federal government at the time, and if you want to talk about stupid people HR stuff, I mean, like you could fill out 700 episodes on the stupidity of HR practices in the federal government, right?
Right. I like to say
Like this,
rules being a substitute for intelligence, right?
that's it, right? It's just like I was like, this is stupid. Like, what are we doing? So that was kind of a key thing of creating an environment that was just better for people that were motivated, that had initiative. And I'm a big fan of McGregor's Theory X versus Theory Y kind of ideology, kind of X being industrial, butts and seats, Y being motivated and trust your people for kind of a shorter version of it. And I'm very much of a Theory Y. We don't have a leave program here. We don't have hours. And it's like, do your job and be a part of the team. And if you're not on the team, go. And that was kind of my like one of my founding beliefs was like if you get the right people on the team, you can do a lot with not a ton of folks. And as I mentioned, I'm an Army dude, and my ideology comes from the special operations world where there's a very small group of operators that can do very big things because they're highly trained, highly motivated, they really want to be there. And that was our ideology from here. And you can't do that unless you kind of have a mission focused, people first type mentality.
Very true. So that's so interesting. That's a great story, and I absolutely agree with you. We had a client a few years ago that was wanting me to go in and fire one of his employees because she was late every day. And it was same environment. It's like they're not making money by being in person, so there was really no reason to have this as a rule, other than it was a standard. And so I dug in with him, and he was like, "Well, it's a sign of respect." And I'm like, "Okay, well, let me go talk to her." And I sat down with her, and it turned out her kid's school, the dropout was at 8, and she wasn't going to drop off her 6-year-old and like at 7:45 and leave him just to fend for himself for
Right.
15 minutes, right? So she was getting in there as soon as she could. But so when I kind of told the guy this story, I was like, what if we just adjusted that be here between 8 and 8:30? And sure enough, she still was there every day at 8:15. So, exceeding expectations, right? But it was just this like ridiculous thing that often we just don't think about what the people need and really ask them those questions. And so, can I talk to you then about like with their background in military and obviously standards being a huge part of who you are? What are then the guardrails and the standards that are uncompromisable for you at Spartan?
I think our values, right? Of growth, respect, integrity, tenacity, and transparency, right? And and those are immutable. They're not only on the wall behind me.
Yeah.
Got to do this in reverse over there. Um, it's really kind of a life through here, right? And I think what you can when you look at the military, right, and you look at even the most rigid organization on the planet, there's definitely flexibility there as to like when you do things, when you don't do things, and some of that's scale, right? If you are a 500,000 person company or a military, the things that you can do are very, very different than you are that when you're smaller. So I think for us, I think we have principles instead of policies, and our principles are immutable. And they give some flexibility there based on operational constraints, based on personal constraints. For instance, if our facilities have to be open at 9 o'clock, a manager that showed up every day at 9:05 because her child had to be dropped off, that may be the wrong position for her.
Mm-hmm.
Like we can't
Totally.
change that standard. But in your example of where if you're in the headquarters, like what's the difference if you start at 8:30 or 8 or whatever? And sometimes there are like our construction company has a stand-up meeting at 8 o'clock every day, and everybody's required to be there because that's when it's kind of the site supers or before the jobs are getting started, and there's an operational reason for that. So that's kind of where we stick the standards in that like, hey, if there's an operational reason for it, you can't violate it. And if it doesn't work for you, that's okay. We'll either get you in a different position or we'll get you to a different company. We can't move this standard. But for the vast majority of headquarters folks in any company, the standards should be those that are revenue based, and it's the same thing here, revenue based that drive revenue. Otherwise, if there's flexibility there, it should be afforded unless there's a reason not to.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think so too. And I mean, I think that clarity that you're able to provide to your staff too to help them understand like this is why this is important, why you have to be here at 8 a.m. because this is when we're all coming together to figure out what the plan is for the day or what we need to be, where we need to be even going for the day, perhaps. And so I think it's just that clarity too that people are willing to do that. It's the arbitrary rules that don't make sense, like your
100%.
example you said at the beginning. We like to call this, Scott, in our world right now, of like giving people agency and helping them have agency over the where they work, when they work, and how they work around the boundaries. And really like having people like when they again understand why they need to be there, but then giving them some flexibility or the agency in within those other boundaries. And it sounds like that's exactly what you're doing then too.
A key text. I'm big on reading books, and a key text that ties into what you're saying is Dan Pink's Drive, right?
Yeah.
Very much so on the autonomy, purpose, and mastery, right? Like very similar to what you just got at too, and that's kind of been kind of a fundamental, I'll say, foundation to our entire team development philosophy here at Spartan. Kind of a thing is like, don't make me manage you. If I
Mm-hmm.
have to manage you, you're going to probably work someplace else.
Mm-hmm.
Because like that's you lead people, you manage assets. And we want to keep our team lean, kind of going back to the private equity world. Like we want to keep our team as lean as we can, and you do that by staffing people that like have a sense of purpose for your mission, right? And it doesn't necessarily, there can be lots of different purposes, right? It's almost impossible to tie it in. If you have a mission like SpaceX or something along those lines, like or the Red Cross, like those are a little bit easier to find, but those are pretty rare out there that companies have those really big missions. Vast majority of companies don't have missions that will drive real purpose in somebody. It's very hard to like have a real purpose in self-storage, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Dry air. Let's be real here, right? We're selling dry air. But the way that we kind of create purpose is right now we are backed by retail networks of investors. Those are individual people. So our people can come to work knowing that they're helping out like friends, cousins, all that other stuff. And some of that's great, but some of it's internal. Some people have their own purpose, but that whole like philosophy of purpose, mastery, and autonomy, right? The whole like no, like no hours, no leave, like do what you need to do, get your job done. um, that's kind of where that foundation was for our entire team philosophy.
Hmm. Well, I think you make a really important point that I'd like to call out to the listeners is you don't have to have an altruistic mission to still have purpose for your employees. I mean, we have a very altruistic mission. So my vision or my mission or however you want to describe it, my why for my company is to end suffering in the workplace. Like that's pretty altruistic, and people can get behind that on my team pretty easily. Let's be real though. And like you said, you're selling dry air. Like you're going to have to make a bigger connection to people. And I think the way you've called that out is so appealing to people because there are also the ones out there that do want to make money, have a background in financial management or have a background in being a property manager. And how do you create connection meaning for them is the way that you just did that. You just bridged that for your employees. And for the listeners, I want to also recognize here that in your companies, every job you have should have meaning of some sort. There is some reason that that job exists, and sometimes you just have to connect the dots, like Scott just did. So that's the part that I think is often missing is like why does it have a meaning? That why does it have meaning? So that's great. I love that. So coming back then to sort of the beginning and the origin story. Now here you are, all these years later. Tell us a little bit now about what you do. Like you were explaining to me at the beginning here, some of the really unique things you do for even recognition. So, do you want to share some of the more recent things that you've been able to bring into your company to continue this amazing culture?
One thing I'll start with is most companies probably under-recognized by like a factor of 10. And I think it's because a lot of times recognition needs to be big things. And I'll talk about some big things, but I'll also talk about some small things too. I think a lot of leaders get hung up because they feel like recognition has to be huge, and it really doesn't. It's actually very, very easy to do. And some of the bigger things that we do, Kendra just mentioned, we just a big thing that we did for our property managers. So we own and operate self-storage facilities, and we have about 90 assets across the United States. And with that, we've got about 80 field team members. We have some technology that we've actually gotten our team members lower than one per facility. But we take the top 10, we call it the elite circle, which that's a terrible name, but that's what happens when you give your team the autonomy to name it themselves. Sometimes they come up with things that sound terrible, but they like, and here we are with the elite circle. And it's our top 10% of our field team that we take to Cabo for a couple of days to really recognize them for the hard work that they do based on a number of metrics. And that this is our first year doing it. We actually got one of our investors does this for his company, and this was something that he did because we were asking him for recognition because he has a much, much bigger company than we are. And this was one of the key things that he said that's really driven results. So that's something that we just started doing. And I literally got back yesterday.
Mm,
And, it's really an honor to take five people out of the country. And this was their first time ever outside the United States. We had two people, it was their first time ever on an airplane.
mm,
Um, so like some really, really good stuff out of that. And it's not going to break the bank because we did it smartly through an all-inclusive and everything. So even from that perspective, it's not overly expensive to go and do that. Like we did it smartly. Um, we have what's called carried interest. It's a private equity term for kind of the ownership that we have in our deals. And we carve off a certain percentage of that and create pools every year for every single one of our employees, even down to our property managers, to just recognize them for the work that they've done. So those are some of the bigger things that we do. But I'm a military guy, so a challenge coin, and I'll save the podcast time for explaining it, but there's a tradition in the military called a challenge coin, and it's to represent certain things. And we do that for our team members. We do birthdays. We do a lot of the same stuff that a lot of people should be doing, and I don't think anything that we're doing is overly special. I just think that we are pretty consistent about keeping it at the forefront and reminding our leaders about the recognition, about the things that we can do. And a handwritten note is about the best thing a leader can do, and it's free. It doesn't cost you anything, and it goes a long way. And if you're a leader and
Mm.
you're not writing 10 notes a week, like you're probably not doing it right.
Mm. That's great. Yeah, it's amazing to me that those two words, thank you, have become some kind of a hoarded thing, where people they don't feel like they should have to thank them for doing their job, or it's like you're just yeah, why not? It's two words. It can
Easy
go so
day.
far. Yeah. So, what are other things you're doing? So you have the handwritten notes, you have the coins. I mean, what are others like? Give us some ideas. Give us some insight into what you're also doing.
So we do one of the things I do is every single week, I have a calendar of all of my team members' birthdays, and I give them a handwritten note and a scratch off lottery ticket,
Oh.
and we send them all over the place, right? They're like a buck, but one of our
Yeah.
property managers won $500 on that,
Nice.
right? And to a property manager, that $500 is really meaningful, and it
Hmm.
costs a buck,
Hmm.
right?
Yeah.
I write notes. So every once a month, I send out a happy birthday card and a $5 Barnes and Noble gift card to every single team member's spouse and children through the entire corporation. A couple $100 a month, right? Like
Hmm.
nothing big. It's huge. We have an internal system. There's a lot of digital ways to do it, right? Like Slack has some stuff and whatnot. We have an internal system called Leapsome. It's our overall like goal management system. It also has a digital praise side of the house. That thing is pinging almost all day, and everybody has access to it for different stuff, right? And the other thing that the last thing I'll leave you with is one of the things that we do is a weekly sync every Monday, and we start out by going around the room with everybody on the sync, and sometimes there's 30 or 40 people on it, and we say one thing we're grateful for from somebody else inside the company, and we do that every
Hmm.
single Monday, and we've done that for 10 years.
Hmm.
So that's just kind of some high level recognition and some free stuff. So.
Hmm. Has any of that ever felt cringeworthy to you?
No, I don't think so. I think
That's
people
good.
really like the sync. The sync meeting is one of those where the gratefuls, that's one of the things we hear new team members are being like, that's one of the coolest things we've ever done. That's a
Yeah.
thing we hear on a fairly consistent basis from our team.
Hmm. Yeah, we do that too at the beginning of it's at the beginning of our team meeting, which is every week. We have what we call shout outs. And it's just lovely. And it's such a great chance to have the team recognize each other because as a leader, sometimes you don't have enough visibility into what everyone is doing to actually you physically
100%.
thanking everyone. You can't do it because you just don't know. But when you start to hear what everyone else says about each other, it feels just as good to the team members because they're being recognized by their teammates. So, yeah, that's fantastic.
I
So,
think
so tell
a
us.
lot of leaders get tripped up with having to be creative on this, and you don't. Just read some leadership books and do what they tell you to do. You don't have to
Mhm.
be creative. There's
Yeah.
nothing creative that needs to come from recognition. Just do something.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. People have a really, actually, really high tolerance for mediocre management. But a bad manager, terrible manager, no, not a lot of high tolerance for that. Like that's what makes people leave. But yeah, so you're right. Just doing something is better than coming up with this like totally brilliant program that's like going to win awards or something. If there were such a thing, such an award
Right.
category, right? Well, so now tell us about some of the people that you have on your team. Like, we'd love to, help attract more people into your organization with this podcast. So, some of our former people who've been interviewed have kind of clipped out parts of the podcast and used it on their About Us page. Which, by the way, for the listeners, in the show notes is Scott's website, and he's got a great About Us page and careers page. But what else? What kind of people are you looking for?
I would say that we're like initiative's a big deal here. It's hard to teach. I've found that it's an attribute that is very, very hard to teach. If somebody doesn't have initiative, it's not super easy to can't really fix that, I don't think. So for somebody to be successful here at Spartan, like you got to have initiative. If somebody's constantly telling you like what to do and you're not looking around the corner, probably not going to last very long. Um, so I would say that's probably the number one thing, and then integrity. Now everybody like has a different definition of that, but as a real estate private equity company with investor money on the line here, being able to admit mistakes and learn from them is huge, and that's a big deal here. One of our sync meetings every week talks about lessons learned, and it's really about uh, talking about mistakes and really what you learned from them. Like with initiative, that's really what it like initiative and integrity at our company is probably the one thing or the two attributes that are the most successful here.
Okay. That's great. And then you've got the property management people. So you've got different basically divisions or different groupings of employees. So you have the property managers, which are all over, and then you've got your headquarters location, which have more of the financial side. Is that correct?
Yep. So we have an office in Golden, we have an office in Seattle. We're spread out all over the place with our property, with our facilities. We also have a Manila-based team in the Philippines. We have one team member in Mexico,
Mhm.
and then we have a construction company as well that is also here in Golden. And then we have our site superintendents that move around the country, kind of as our projects move around. So it's actually kind of a difficult recruiting perspective because we have all these different levels, right? So in the same building, so it can be interesting at point.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, how do you manage the kind of field team culture versus the headquarters culture? How have you what tricks do you have around that? Because that's always a challenge for people when they have kind of an in-office setting and then a separate setting like a warehouse, a manufacturing line, a field team. What are some of the tricks you have for managing and keeping the cultures feeling similar?
I think that we have different brands, but if you were to ask any team member, they would tell you that they are a Spartan. And I think there's a couple different ways to do that. Like our values are uniform across all the companies, but SCM and FreeUp both have kind of a second set. I'll call them a second set of values. They're probably more along guiding principles or something along those lines. Scope is SCM's kind of mnemonic, and space is FreeUp's, but everybody's a Spartan. Everybody goes through very similar onboarding with about a 20% variation depending on what company you're going to actually be working inside of, whether it's FreeUp, SIG, or SCM. So we standardize the onboarding, which means that everybody goes through the same thing. They read the same values, the same mission, the same vision for the parent company. A lot of our benefits are very, very similar, and there's just some field-based differentiation. Like you can't offer unlimited field to a property. It doesn't work.
Right.
So because you can't necessarily work. We have a creative benefit called 2 weeks work from anywhere. That works well from a headquarters perspective. It doesn't really work in the field. So we have adjusted the benefits package, but it's really one team, one fight, and we've just kind of standardized our values across the entire organization, and we tie all performance reviews, no matter what it is, to our values. And we do 360s on the field team has a little bit different one. They have kind of a 9 block. but everything is tied back to our values to make sure it's as uniform as you can. You'll always get variations. Even in the military, if you go to the 82nd Airborne, the culture in the 82nd Airborne is very different than the culture in the 1st Cav Division, but it all ties back to like kind of the overarching Army principles, but the ideologies, the visions, and even the way some of the units do stuff is very, very different depending on what, division you're at and where you're at. So,
Hmm. That's fantastic. So you've got you also don't call your folks employees, you call them teammates, but definitely not a family, right? And so tell us more about that. Why do you have that differentiation? Some people love to call their organizations a family. We're like a family, which personally is a big eye roller for me.
I agree. One, it's an eye roller because we're not family.
No.
We're not, right? And family is allowing cousin Eddie to park his RV in your driveway for a month during Christmas, right?
Right.
That's what you deal with family. I am not going to tolerate the metaphorical cousin Eddie parking his RV in my parking lot for a month.
Right.
Not going to
Totally.
be it, right? So that's, I think, number one, the whole this is a family company is a bunch of nonsense, anyways. Because when push comes to shove, it's not a family. It is a team. And the difference is a team knows that the object is to win. That's what the team is put together to do. And that's honestly what companies are put together to do is to win at whatever they're trying to do. They need to win. And most of the time that's profitability, that's shareholder returns, that's whatever that is, the company needs to win. I think we've gotten away from that a little bit too much and have forgotten the reason for a company is to win. That's the team. And what happened, like when you have that team mentality, is you have to make the team every single day, or you might end up getting cut. That sounds harsh, but that is just the absolute reality of a team versus a family. Like absolutely, like that's kind of what we mean by that here. And people have been told, like, listen, you don't have to be a jerk about offboarding a team member that isn't necessarily cutting it. You can always be compassionate about that. But what it is not fair to the rest of the team members is to keep cousin Eddie parked in the driveway when everybody else is doing what they're supposed to be doing.
That is amazing. That's so important. And so many leaders, Scott, keep people on the team because they care for them and they see themselves as a steward for one instead of a steward for many. And yeah, I think that's a really good perspective to bring into this.
Yep.
Well, so on our kind of final note, then, I'd love to hear just what's up, what is kind of in the future for you? Like, what are the things that you've got on your strategic plan when it comes to continuing to support your people? What are things that you and your people team, not HR, but people team,
Yep.
are doing together?
I think it's really about a key aspect that we're doing now. Like in the age of AI, like I think it's been kind of a travesty the way that it was positioned, kind of at first, um, versus what it's actually turning out to be. One of the things that we're trying to do is hold our team kind of constant and increase our output through tools and training and skills for our team members kind of in kind of a new era. And that's been a big deal here. We're really trying to lean forward and leverage those tools so that each individual person can really grow more because the reason for that is for us on the promote share, it's a limited pie based on what we're able to acquire in that particular year. So the less pieces we have to slice off and the bigger the pie, the more people get. So going back to that initial kind of ideology in regards to that small, highly trained like special forces team, that's kind of what we're trying to create here. And we're trying to give people as many tools as possible so that we're really slowing down on our hiring, frankly, and really ratcheting up on our productivity for our team members so that we can grow that pie and each individual team member's piece is much bigger of that pie so that they can achieve the goals and the dreams that they're trying to achieve on their personal side.
Mhm. All right, that's fantastic. All right, well, I think on that note, that's a great place to end here. Scott, thank you so much for sharing some of your insight, just a little bit. I think we could have gone on and on for a lot longer given the amazing work that you have done with Spartan Investments. So, thank you so much for joining me today on How I Turned the Corner.
Thank you, Kendra. Appreciate having it, and hopefully I added values to your listeners.